Hello, my name is Alexei, and you're probably watching Ask a Friend. And today, my friend is Dr. Welton, professor of statistics, right?
That's correct. I teach in the psychology department, but mostly teach statistics courses.
So, it must be a good conversation. So, how is your day so far?
So I had a lot of boring assessment work to do, but I made good progress. How about you?
Oh, I just got from work. So, I had whole day of boring things.
Repetition.
Boring repetitious work, but
So when I was a college student, 2 summers I worked in a factory.
mm, what?
We, the factory made oil cans.
Oh,
So the oil cans back then were just cylinders.
mm-hmm.
You couldn't put a cap on them and save some for next time.
It's
And I worked in the shipping
reminds me a
department.
little. It reminds me of sardines that can.
Well, I mean, these were quart size, so bigger than
Mm-hmm.
sardines. But every 6 seconds, I had to grab the next box, fold it, shove it against the machine would fill it with
Mm-hmm.
24 empty oil cans, drop it on the conveyor belt that would take it up every 6 seconds.
Oh, so precise.
6,000 times a shift.
Ah,
So that's why I finished college, so I didn't have to do the same thing every 6 seconds.
nope. I'm not doing this. I'll finish my college.
Yeah.
Um, so well, let's start then by how did you become a Christian?
So I grew up in a Christian home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a Baptist church in town over by the hospital,
Okay.
and my great grandfather helped start that church.
Oh.
That's a new building. The old building um, was across from where McDonald's is now,
Mm-hmm.
where the Marathon gas station is. But my
Mm-hmm.
great grandfather helped start that church, and my dad was treasurer of that church for many years.
Mm-hmm. So around, you're from Grove City.
I am.
Ooh. And now you're also a professor in Grove City College.
That's right.
Nice. So yeah, I'm sorry for interruption you.
So early on,
Mm-hmm.
um, I remember a particular point when I was 5 years old where um, I made a very specific decision to put my trust in Christ.
Mm-hmm. That young age.
Yeah.
5. Wow. Yeah, when I went to G3 conference last January and I met one of the, um, I guess, leaders of that conference, I forgot his name, and he said he he also became a Christian at a very young age, like maybe third grade or something, and like he was like, I was just so overwhelmed about thinking about the hell. Like, wow, that's not something what people think when they're in third grade. Like, yep. So,
Yeah, that was actually something in my mind as a 5 year old, actually.
wow, that's exact.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I think of myself, it was probably a car or something, or or even an ice cream, not the hell. So, yeah. So it was your parents' influence.
Yeah.
Mhm. So how how did you choose statistics and psychology just in general?
So actually, when I first went to college,
Mm.
I went to a Bible college and was, training to become full-time Christian service person.
Oh.
After actually 3 years of college, I spent most of the summer in France, working with some missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought at that point in time that my education was too narrow, that interacting with the French students, um, obviously the Catholic Church is very strong in France, but most of the French people don't actually go to church. It's a
Right.
relatively unchurched country. And the individuals weren't interested in talking about the Bible. They were interested in talking about philosophical issues and psychological issues, and I found it very hard to communicate with them because my training was so far removed from what they were interested in talking
Mm-hmm.
about. So when I came home, I decided to broaden my education into a liberal arts field
Mm-hmm.
and was interested in the idea of psychology and how people interact with each other and those sorts of things. And so that was a major transition time for me.
Oh. So you first studied. So what was first that you studied? Statistics or psychology?
I would say psychology, but psychologists use statistics a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my early training, I had to take a statistics course. And it's like, hey, I really like this stuff.
Oh. So yeah. So sounds like you had a lot of influence in your life. Parents, because you grew up in a Christian home. Like, okay, I do believe in God and things. Then people in France, just because you could not communicate with each other about something. So,
So our churches, of course, are imperfect because they're
mhm,
filled with imperfect people who are
right.
all needy people. And sometimes churches get into squabbles and fights and splits. And while I was in
Yeah.
college, my church had a major split. And so that was also part of my crisis time in life, where I looked
Hmm.
at the church I grew up in, all the Sunday school teachers I had had growing up fighting with each other and ultimately going two different directions. It was very troubling.
Oh, wow.
My brother actually quit going to church for 20 years as a
Mm.
result of it. God put in my hand a book that I read that really meant a lot to me. It was written by Francis Schaeffer.
Yeah.
Francis Schaeffer was, of course, the founding pastor of our church here in Grove City.
Mm-hmm.
And that book um, was very instrumental in keeping me in the church rather than taking the path that my brother took, saying, for 20 years,
Right.
I'm done with this.
So, what persuaded you to stay?
Yeah, it was reading Francis Schaeffer's book and just realizing that, there is a God who is there, there is a meaning in life, and
Mm-hmm.
just because the people around us don't behave in ways that we think are appropriate or in
Mm-hmm.
ways that are consistent with how they taught us to behave in Sunday school,
Right.
there is still a God who is there, and He is not silent, and we're responsible for the choices that we make in our life, seeking to honor Him. And
Mm-hmm.
so those books of Francis Schaeffer really helped me to refocus my thinking and stay with the Christian faith.
Right. So you write multiple books by him.
Right. I mean, he had three in particular that were a set. The God who is there, Escape from Reason, and He is there and He is not silent. All small books,
Mm-hmm.
tough
Oh,
reading, but they meant a lot to me at that time.
yeah. he is there, but he's not silent. Yeah, I think that's something that probably every Christian should read. Like, whether you're, I don't know, been Christian for a long, long time, and you're like just became a Christian, because that's something people struggle probably every day. Like, okay, God, where are you? I'm praying to you, and you don't give me any answer. What?
Yeah, we struggle with that.
So, um, so one of my subscribers um, asked me a question about maybe some data, possibly statistics. So the other day you told me that you are monitoring the things that are going on here in Pennsylvania with the coronavirus. How is it looking as of today?
So we've seen over the last 3 or 4 weeks the number of new cases in the country here in the US just skyrocketing. So
Right.
that we have more new cases now than we've ever had.
Mm.
But the number of deaths has not grown very much. It's up a little, but not dramatically.
How much?
So, and I don't have the numbers memorized, but I think the number of new cases has doubled or tripled,
Mm-hmm.
whereas the number of new deaths is up maybe 10-15%.
Mm-hmm.
So that begs the question, what's going on? Why are we seeing so many more cases, and yet the death rate is only up a little bit? So the statistical question could be thought of as, to what extent is there a correlation? To what extent is there a relationship between the number of new cases and the number of deaths? Now, it could be as simple as we're going to see those number of deaths go up real high, real quick.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes a little while. That when you get a new case that gets serious, it's going to take a few weeks for the symptoms to get really bad, for the individual to get real serious.
Mm-hmm.
As I crunched the numbers and looked at the relationship over time, April, May, June, between the number of new cases and the number of deaths, I got the strongest statistical results when I used a 24-day lag.
Mm-hmm.
So if number of deaths are going up, if number of new cases are going up, we wouldn't expect the number of deaths to go up for 24 days. It takes a while for the virus to have an effect.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be simply we're not seeing those death rates go up yet, but we will by next week.
So I guess we'll have to live and shall see.
But there are other things that could be going on
Mm-hmm.
that would be a better way to spin the data or look at the data.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, let me just put this in context. The scientists are calling this a novel virus, meaning we've never experienced, we don't know very much about this virus.
Then didn't we have something similar before?
Similar, but I don't want to take that too far. I mean, there are unique characteristics,
Mm-hmm.
and in particular, because it's a novel virus, there are just so many things we don't know.
Right.
And lots of people in the media are making dogmatic statements on this perspective, that perspective. The fact is, we don't know. There's so many things we don't know if there are long-term effects, people who get the virus, recover, survive. We don't know if 5 years they're going to have some permanent lung damage or something. Could be. We don't know. There's so many things that we don't know about the virus.
Right.
We do know in southern states that the death rate has started to go up. Florida, Texas have seen higher death rates in the last 5 to 7 days.
Mm.
But they're nothing like what we saw in April. That in New York, we were seeing 1,000 deaths a day in
Mhm.
April. Florida is now seeing 100 deaths a day. That's 100 significant, meaningful deaths. And if you know one of them, even just one is meaningful.
Right.
But it's dramatically less than what we were seeing in April. So even though we're hearing stories about how the numbers are going up in some states, there's still nothing like what we were seeing in April and May.
Mhm.
So
And
maybe
nothing.
we're going to see them jump up,
Mm.
but maybe not. Maybe it's
So when you say nothing like in April, you mean lesser or
right.
more?
Instead of 1,000 a day in New York, we're
Okay.
seeing 100 a day in Florida.
Mhm.
So much smaller numbers.
Yeah.
In April, we had a lot of crises in nursing homes.
Mhm.
People who were very elderly were being exposed to the virus. And I at least like to think we've dealt with that problem. So, I mean, almost 2/3 of the deaths in Pennsylvania happened in nursing homes.
Mm.
So I'd like to think our death rate's not going to go up as far because we're dealing better with the nursing homes.
Mhm.
A lot of the new cases that we're seeing now are 20 and 30-year-olds. And presumably, from what we've seen so far, 20 and 30-year-olds don't have fatal experiences as much as your 70 and 80-year-olds.
Right. So basically, everyone can get it, but if you're younger, you're just more likely to survive.
Right. Much
Mhm.
more likely.
Much more.
And it's the 20 and 30-year-olds,
Mhm.
you're in that group,
So
who
far.
are just really had it with this social isolation. It's
Mhm.
like, we've done this for 4 months, don't want to do it anymore, I want to get out. It's summer, let's. Um, so maybe it's not going to go up because it's a different population of people who are getting the virus.
Right. Yeah. Also, before summer, I heard some people saying, "Oh, summer will come, and it will be over, and blah blah blah." And then some other smart people like, virus doesn't care. Like, there is no sign that it will stop.
And it hasn't.
So, no, not yet. So how do we as a Christian should look at this?
Yeah, let me just say one more thing first. What would really change the world
Hmm.
is if the virus would mutate into something that's significantly weaker. So, we had a huge pandemic 100 years ago, the
Hmm.
flu of 1918. They say that 50 to 100 million people across the world died. There were so many deaths they couldn't keep track of them. Much more ill prepared than we've been in the 21st century to deal with it.
Right.
Somebody asked me recently, and so what brought the pandemic of 1918 to an end? And what brought it to an end was that the virus mutated
Something
into a
like
much weaker virus. So we had high death rates on the East Coast and West Coast of the United States.
Mhm.
But by the time the virus got to the Midwest, Chicago, St. Louis, etc., it was a much weaker virus and you had a much lower death rate.
Mhm.
So that's another possibility. Perhaps perhaps our death rate is staying a little lower because perhaps the virus is starting to mutate. Maybe it's not as strong and virulent as it
Mhm.
was a few months ago. We've also made some mistakes
Mhm.
in March and April about how we were treating patients in the ICU units.
Mhm.
A couple of the treatment decisions that were made then, we have since decided were absolutely the wrong thing to do, and we were actually making people worse rather than better. So lots of things could happen. Probably all of those things are having some impact on why the death rate isn't as high as we might expect. But again, maybe in a week we'll see it climb. I don't know.
Yeah.
In Pennsylvania, it is not climbing.
Well, I hope it will not climb.
I don't mean to say it's not going up. It's going up a little bit in Pennsylvania, but
Mm.
not dramatically like it has in other states.
Well, I guess I should say it's good,
Yeah.
but it would be better if it doesn't. But so yeah, how we as a Christian should look into all these rates that.
Yeah, I mean, God works in mysterious ways. We now live in a culture where, I mean, we're rich. We're often we think we're self-sufficient. We don't think we need church. We don't think
Mm.
we need each other as Christians. We don't think we need God. And we need reminders that, you know what? We are weak human vessels.
Yeah.
And as Christians, we should, welcome those reminders because, we're susceptible to all those temptations as
Mhm.
anyone else.
Right. Yeah, and I guess we should also take this coronavirus as a reminder that we are not strong as we think. Like, we're just humans, but God is in control. Um, so one of my friends actually asked me a question, and you might be able to answer it. Do you know how coronavirus has affected the church and all these some sort of church splits in terms of wearing the masks or not wearing the mask?
Yeah. So I just had a conversation yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody in a neighboring church wanted to find out what we were doing in our church and how it was working and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she attends a church where nobody is going to wear a mask.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, we're not going to do that. And so you have those potential issues.
Right.
I don't like to wear a mask. I don't want to wear a mask. But I'm convinced by the evidence that when I wear a mask, I reduce the likelihood that I might infect somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I, of course, assume that I am still COVID negative, but I don't know that. Lots of people are asymptomatic. It
Mm-hmm.
appears as if asymptomatic people do easily affect others.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I am called to love my neighbor as myself.
Right.
And, oh my, one of my prayers as I get up every morning is that I pray I don't do something stupid to hurt somebody else.
Yeah, not wearing a mask in front of somebody else.
I mean, there's so many ways in our lives. I mean, I could make some stupid decision driving a vehicle that
Mm-hmm.
causes an accident, takes somebody's life, or makes somebody permanently crippled.
Mm-hmm.
I could say something stupid to somebody that makes them question their faith or something. There's so many ways that we could in our human weakness,
Mhm.
offend and hurt somebody else. And
Yeah, somewhere else I did hear quite kind of joke that here in America there are at least 11 commandments, and the 11th commandment is be kind. So be kind to people.
yeah,
Don't be harsh with them. Don't tell them like they're sinners or something. Just be kind.
just be kind.
So, yeah. So, what do you think about this mass and even church being split about this question? Is
So one of the things in our society that really burdens me, it sounds like I'm going a different direction, but I'll come right back,
hmm
is the issue of abortion.
right.
That, and I would consider myself to have a very strong pro-life position. That we certainly have injunctions in the Bible that we are to, you know, treat innocent, weak individuals with grace. Um, and the idea that somehow it's okay to take the life of a newborn, I just think that is just totally wrong. I remember as a young child frequently reading missionary books of missionaries in China and India and wherever. And every single one of those books would talk about, usually it was little baby girls that had been abandoned to die.
hmm
And it's like, I never thought that sort of thing would become the norm in our environment. I mean, we do it before birth rather than after birth most of the time, but we don't protect the helpless, the innocent. I would suggest that if somebody is going to be consistently pro-life, that you have to respect life in all kinds of applications.
Right.
People taking um, individuals into their home to live for years, as you have experienced the blessing by the Hannons. That's a pro-life activity.
hmm
Adopting children is a pro-life activity. And as simple as it is to put on a mask and wear a mask, if I can reduce the likelihood
hmm
that I'm infecting somebody else, that's a pro-life activity. And I would argue that to be consistently pro-life at this point in 2020, one needs to be willing to wear a mask.
Right. Well, we'll take a small break and then we will come back. Oh.